Okay, awesome. We'll be getting started in just 1 minute. We still have folks joining us from the waiting room. Please just rename yourself, first and last name, with your pronouns and your organization that you're with, or the city that you're calling in from. I'm going to spotlight our guests so you can see everyone before we get into introductions. Awesome. I hope everyone can see our guest panelists, Diane Wilson and John Beard. Thank you so much for joining us. So before we hop into things, I just wanted to say a few words about the People versus Fossil Fuels Coalition. It is a coalition of over 1,200 organizations across the country that are using people power to put pressure on President Biden to use his executive authority to declare a climate emergency, a national climate emergency, so that he can tap into so many executive powers and truly address climate change at the pace and level and scale that we need it to be addressed at this point. So I will introduce our guest speakers before we start the film. I'll allow them to say a few words about themselves. So first we have Diane Wilson. She has been fighting to protect the Gulf Coast for over 30 years. During the last 30 years, she has launched legislative campaigns, demonstrations, hunger strikes, sunk boats, and even climbed chemical towers in her fight to protect her Gulf Coast bay. We also have John Beard Jr. with us. He is an active member of his community and has dedicated his life and career to serving the public. He has over 32 years of public service as an elected official, 9 as a city councilman and mayor pro temp, while with current and previous service on numerous boards, commissions with the city of Port Arthur. So would you like to say a few words before we get into the film?
Diane, I'll let you go first.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm very glad to be here, and thank you for inviting me. I am a long time. People always ask me what I am, and I really am. I'm basically a 4th generation fisherwoman. So I'm just a fisherwoman. I'm from a very small fishing community, and probably the only thing I got going for me is my passion and my stubbornness, and it's lasted me 33 years. So here I be.
And I guess that leaves me next. Well, first of all, good evening to everybody. Glad to be with you here. I'm a little under the weather, so if my voice sounds a little funny or crappy at times, please forgive me, but I'm in fairly good voice this evening. But I hope all of you are in good health and good spirits, and I'm glad to be here. As you heard mentioned earlier, that I have a lot of years in experience, and I've got one bit of experience. I don't know if she mentioned or not, but I am a retiree as a 38-year employee of one of the largest petrochemical companies in the world, ExxonMobil. But I think what that also does, it gives me a very unique perspective because I was born and raised on the fence line. Matter of fact, I lived right across the street from the tank farm for what is now the largest refinery in the country, Motiva. And I could look out our kitchen window and in my backyard where I played so many days with my dog and did things and cut grass. You could see what's now Valero Refinery, which was back then Gulf Oil Company. And if you Google Earth Port Arthur and look at it, you'll see that it's virtually surrounded by tank farms and refineries and pipelines. And there are even more of them that are planning to be on the way. We're already home to 2 LNGs with a 3rd trying to get in that I and my organization are vigorously fighting. And we're also at the nexus of climate change, having had in the past 15 to 17 years, 5 major hurricanes, at least that many smaller storms that have come through. And we're also home to the largest rainfall in the country at over 60 and 5/8 inches. So when you speak about all these things, Port Arthur comes immediately into play because it's been affected by all of them. And now there's even more that they're planning to be on the way. So we all got involved in this movie to get President Biden's attention and to try to get him to listen to that. But I want to go a step further, as I've talked to many elected officials from across the country by Zoom call and some in person just within the last 2 weeks in DC. That don't take John Beard's word for it or even Diane Wilson's. Come on down to the Gulf Coast. Come here and see it for yourself. Come talk to us. Let you talk to the people, to the fishermen she has to deal with, or to the mother of the child who has to take breathing treatment and have a breathalyzer because of the poor air quality here, which we're now under ozone action alert today as well as tomorrow. So it'll be the 3rd day in a row. So don't take my word for it. I'm just a messenger, but come and see it for yourself. And then let's make this harder for them and even harder for the president to not do this, to give us this climate emergency and use his executive powers. So hopefully this movie will give you a bit of a better understanding of the fights that we all have because they're all interconnected. But at the same time, spur you to action to join hands with just not the people in this movement that are like us, but people that are outside of the movement, our friends and neighbors and relatives and others. Because if we don't grow this movement and join hands and pull together, then we're not going to be able to save this planet, and we're not going to be able to save us. So that's what's important to me, and I'm glad you all will be able to see this tonight, and I'm glad to be able to sit here and share it with you. So thank you much. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for those opening words, and I'm sure everyone else shares that same enthusiasm to fight fossil fuels. That's why we're all here, right? Excuse me. We were going to hear a few words from the filmmaker before we got started. I'm not seeing your name pop up, John. If you are here, feel free to put it in the chat and we can unmute you. Maybe you're one of the many Danielle Wilkersons here tonight. But if not, we can go ahead and get started with the film. Okay.
Alrighty. Great, so I'm gonna screen share. One thing to note is sometimes when you screen share, it lags a little bit, but the audio should be fine and we will have captions on the video. So, alrighty, actually, let me just double check that I'm sharing sound. Okay, great. Alrighty, so I'm gonna get started.
Every single family has cancers. Every single family in our tribe. Cardiovascular diseases. Our babies walk with these little asthma inhalers in their pockets and share them with each other, but they forget to take their own. Autoimmune diseases because of what goes on with the air, the water, and the earth there. We will resist because we exist. We will continue to exist because we resist.
We are the protectors.
It's not about what we can do in the next 10 years anymore.
This has actually hit the United States extremely severely, even in Biden's first year.
The world is hurtling towards climate chaos.
We have alternatives to this.
That's why it's so important for the president to really declare the climate emergency.
He could do that with a stroke of a pen. We are suffering and we are dying.
And this has really woken us up. It has pulled us together.
And if we do not stand up to the political calculus,
we're going to lose everything. So I'm here because scientists are not being listened to. And we've been trying to warn you guys for so many decades that we're heading towards a catastrophe. And we've been being ignored. The scientists in the world have been being ignored. And it's gotta stop. We're gonna lose everything. And we're not joking. We're not lying. We're not exaggerating. This is so bad, everyone. On April 4th, the IPCC Working Group 3 report from their 6th assessment was released, and it said what we've all known for a very long time, which is that we need to have a complete moratorium on all new fossil fuel infrastructure right now. And that's even just to have a coin toss chance of staying under 2 degrees Celsius, which in my opinion will be catastrophic. And yet, leaders of the world are still working as fast as they can to expand fossil fuel infrastructure, taking us 180 degrees in the wrong direction where we need to go, deeper and deeper into the climate catastrophe. I cannot stand for this as a scientist. I cannot stand for this as a citizen. I cannot stand for this as a father. And I am willing to take that risk, to risk arrest for this beautiful planet and for my kids. Every day we wait, every year we wait, every presidential cycle that we wait to take action locks in more loss irreversibly to our Earth's life support systems, to biodiversity, to humans around the world, especially the most vulnerable. So at some point, we're going to need leaders who are courageous enough to take a stand.
If the Obama presidency represented a lost 8 years to start transitioning off fossil fuels, the Trump administration sent us spinning headlong on an even worse course. As a candidate, Joe Biden promised a change in direction.
We're going to vastly cut down on the amount of fossil fuels that we use.
I will no longer fund oil companies with subsidies.
We'll bring America back into the Paris Agreement and put us back in the business of leading the world on climate change again.
And appealing to potential voters, laid out a plan to address the climate crisis that included key commitments to stopping all new drilling on federal lands and ending fossil fuel subsidies. He talked about moving off oil and towards a renewable energy future, and said repeatedly that he regarded climate change as an existential threat, one he would make a priority if elected. Once in office, President Biden took some encouraging early steps, shutting down the Keystone XL pipeline and re-entering the Paris Climate Agreement. But as the months went by, his administration returned to business as usual by embracing an all-of-the-above energy strategy that included new fossil fuel projects, new pipelines, and unproven industry schemes marketed as climate solutions, like so-called carbon capture.
We're going to get rid of the $40 billion fossil fuel subsidies, and we're going to invest it in clean energy and carbon capture.
To build more infrastructure to receive LNG, and to take steps to increase the efficiency of gas.
With slim margins in both House and Senate, and particularly troublesome representatives from coal countries standing in the way, Congress has managed to slow both new proposals and funding for programs and budgets intended to help reduce the impacts of climate change. The administration also greenlighted the largest oil and gas lease in U.S. history, offering more than 80 million acres in the Gulf of Mexico for drilling, which could, over coming decades, produce 1 billion barrels of oil.
We're approaching a record levels of oil and gas production in the United States, and we're on track to set a record of oil production next year.
For the moment, the courts have blocked the lease.
The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, literally said, this is an atlas of incredible human suffering, as well as an indictment of the failure of climate leadership. That is encapsulated in President Biden's continued commitment for oil and gas. And that has to stop. That is the one spigot that has to turn off if we're really going to transition to the renewable energy future we need.
I don't get the sense, unfortunately, that he as a human being understands where we're heading and just what it's going to mean for the people of the world if we stay on this course and keep burning fossil fuels. We could see billions of deaths. This feels to me like the last moment.
people over here have cancer. The lady in that second house back there, she died with cancer. Then a few months later, her husband died with cancer. One of our friends, he lived across the street from this facility, and he died with respiratory issues. It's sad, though. It's really sad to see what's going on.
Sharon Levine lives in the same community where she was born, in Welcome, Louisiana, in St. James Parish. The former special ed teacher turned environmental activist lives just a mile from her birthplace alongside the Mississippi River, a neighborhood in the center of Cancer Alley. The 85-mile stretch from Baton Rouge to New Orleans, where oil, gas, and petrochemicals hang heavy in the air, and residents are 50 times more likely than the national average to get cancer.
The parish officials voted for this area to be industrial. They did that in 2014 without the citizens of St. James knowing that they were doing it. And then when they sold our high school, sold our post office, and built this other plant, that's when I found out about it. So I had to make a choice.
In 2018, she thought her hard-working days were behind her, until she learned of a $1.25 billion plastics manufacturing plant about to open next door. One that would have generated 1 million pounds of liquid hazardous waste every year.
And I believe that every American has a fundamental right to breathe clean air and drink clean water. But I know that we haven't fulfilled that right. No, we haven't fulfilled that right for a generation or more in places like Cancer Alley in Louisiana.
Armed with little more than statistics and tenacity, Sharon rallied her neighbors under the banner of Rise St. James and led the fight to deny the permits, which in 2019 they were. But despite their early successes, Sharon Levine and her Rise St. James neighbors are again feeling threatened, thanks to the announcement of a $10 billion Formosa plastics plant that hopes to be built just 2 miles from her home.
Formosa plant would be 14 small plants inside the big complex. That's too much for any human being to breathe. They're gonna make plastics. And the chemicals being used to make plastic are cancer-causing. And plus they're gonna pollute the river, our drinking water, even more. They don't care. They don't care about the people, they care about the profit. But it don't go to the citizens, it goes to the industry. But they wanna make us a sacrifice so they can make their billions and millions of dollars. When they wanted to approve this plant to come into this district on the East Bank, a predominantly white community, they voted no for it. When they say put it in no 5th district, oh yes, all of them voted for it. Because you know why? Nobody would say a word in the 5th district. Nobody would even speak up in the 5th district until RISE came into existence. Politicians have let us down. They don't care about us. They're not trying to protect us. And the people in St. James look up to Rise St. James to help. We can't solve all the problems. We are suffering and we are dying. And I want to let President Biden know what's going on firsthand, not from the politicians, from the citizens of St. James. And I think once he see it firsthand, I think he's going to do something about it. I really feel like that.
The oil and gas industry is sort of the biggest Goliaths there are, and seems they're able to pull the strings and get their bidding done through our democratic institutions. So what I see happening is this kind of David and Goliath battle with all of us as the Davids taking on the fossil fuel Goliaths kind of for control over our democratic system. And so we are building a slingshot made out of good science that shows us what we can do, love for our children and for the planet, and then kind of grassroots political savvy. We can't desist, right? We're protecting life itself. We're protecting the only habitable home that we have. And so we just keep fighting.
Booker T. Washington said, cast down your bucket where you are. In other words, do what you can where you are. You don't have to worry about being Greta Thunberg. You don't have to even worry about being John Beard. God knows we don't need too many of us. But we need to be the best person we can be. We need to do our part. But we can't let money drive us. It's got to be about the people. There's too much suffering going on.
John Beard was born in Port Arthur, Texas, gas and oil refining capital of the United States, and worked in the petrochemical industry for 38 years. Today, he still lives in Port Arthur and heads the Port Arthur Community Action Network, in the same neighborhood where he grew up, refusing to leave, despite the heavy, ever-present smell of oil and gas in the air. Coming from within the industry, in the past few years, Beard has become a leading voice against fossil fuel expansion, though living in the heart of a community that extracts a fortune from oil and gas refining.
It's carcinogenic compounds, it's compounds that are toxic. And how much of that are you going to breathe every day without there being some toxic or chronic effect on your health? And people seem to ignore that and tell you it's about jobs. You have a population of a city of 55,000, 2/3 of which are considered economically disadvantaged. Average income here is $35,000 a year. His average home value here is less than $60,000. So in spite of all the wealth that the petrodollars bring, the expansions that come here, the constant expansions and the constant programs that are saying, we're going to hire Port Arthur people, we're going to create jobs, the jobs don't go here. Should we be sacrificed so America can have oil and gas where we can do this in a better way? We have to transition away from this toxic fossil fuels, because if we don't, then we're all going to be stuck breathing this air. We're all going to be stuck with sea level rise and bigger, more impactful storms, more fires out west, more flooding in the coastal areas. You're going to have more cancer clusters, more diseases that are happening that we don't have any solution to. We're all going to be stuck with not having the type of jobs or quality of life for our children, children's children that we want to see happen. No more expansions, no more pipelines, no more gas terminals, no more oil exports. You can't do it. There's too much suffering going on. Another world is possible. The question is, do we have the courage and the will to make that world come into existence? And we're going to have to do it, or else we won't have this world any longer.
The fossil fuel party is over now, and these guys need to be evicted because they are posing a national security threat. They're upending our ability to have pollination, which drives our food system. We won't be able to do farming. Fresh water is becoming unavailable. All these kind of basic things that we need to run a civilization are under threat. And it's the job of the federal government to look out for the well-being of the citizenry. And I would say that one of our two major parties is actively destroying those things, and the other is not really rising to defend them with this kind of speed and single-minded purpose that's required in this moment.
The boom in liquefied natural gas plants, monstrous facilities that receive gas by long bomb trains traveling across the country and liquefy it on site so that it can be loaded onto massive transoceanic ships, is thanks to rules changed under President Obama that allowed U.S.-produced gas and oil to be exported. War in Ukraine has elicited mixed messages on the energy front from the Biden administration. The fact that Europe remains addicted to Russian oil and gas opened the door to the possibility of pushing for renewable energy expansion. Instead, President Biden's first call was for American fossil fuel companies to ramp up production and encouraged new liquefied natural gas plants to be built for export.
We're going to work to ensure an additional 15 billion cubic meters of liquefied natural gas, LNG, for Europe this year. To accomplish this, the European Commission is going to work with the member states to store gas across the continent, to build more infrastructure to receive LNG.
There is nothing temporary about a build-out of new LNG terminals. Once billions of dollars have been sunk into new pipelines and refineries, and the oil and gas are flowing, companies and petrostates will have every incentive to keep them going. Most of these new plants will just be hitting their stride in 2050, the year we're supposed to be off fossil fuels.
Instead of the Biden administration slowing down or doing everything that they could within their power to at least slow walk leases, they ended up going the exact opposite direction and have actually leased more oil and gas permits than the Trump administration to date.
The United States has become the #1 extractor of oil and gas from the ground and the #1 exporter of natural gas and crude oil in the world. And that's a shameful fact. And it's the liquefied natural gas that makes that possible. The way to get gas across the ocean to foreign markets is different because gas takes up a lot of room when it's a vapor, right? So you need to squish it into a liquid. And to do that, you have to build a whole power plant. So that requires lots and lots of energy and lots of emissions on top of what you're already getting from fracking it out of the ground, right? The LNG export market is really what's driving the whole train now. It's kind of the tail that wags the dog.
Today, there are more than 110 LNG facilities up and running on America's coastlines, with a demand for more. Projects like this in Miami, built by New Fortress Energy, are part of our growing coastal skylines. New Fortress would like to build a similar plant in the tiny community of Gibbstown, New Jersey, which sits on the Delaware River just beneath the Philadelphia airport. For the moment, permits have not been granted. A Trump-era rule allowed bomb trains carrying highly explosive gas to travel through densely populated cities. So far, the Biden administration has only temporarily suspended the rule, rather than deny it. The Gibbstown plant is delayed, but still hoping for permits which would allow it to move forward. The proposed plant in Gibbstown is an environmental justice fight. The trains carrying highly explosive gas would run through some of the poorest neighborhoods in New Jersey and Philadelphia, through communities that, thanks to poverty, do not have the resources, extra time, or knowledge to fight back. If or when there are accidents, derailments, explosions, leaks, it is those same low-wealth neighborhoods on the front lines that would pay the heaviest costs.
Every time you have a project that's susceptible to doing damage, is always passed through the poorest of neighborhoods, because you see me as an inferior person. You don't see me as your equal. If you saw me as your equal, you wouldn't be treating me this way.
Fairman Morales, native of Puerto Rico, has been a union electrician in Philadelphia for more than 30 years. He lives in North Philly, home to some of the most impoverished urban neighborhoods in the city, if not the country. Fairman is a spokesman for the group Philly Boricuas, which lobbies for fair treatment of Philadelphia's Latino population.
I am in a place called Taller Puertorriqueño. It is the cultural heart of the Puerto Rican community. This is where you will learn about our history, about our struggles, and about our culture. This is an extremely poor community. If you were to walk around here, you are going to see a lot of homeless people. You're going to see a lot of people trapped on drugs and in the escape, as we say. And you're going to see a lot of people that are just living day to day, you know, paycheck to paycheck. But it's a beautiful neighborhood in terms of the people that you see, that there's a lot of people that care about each other, are family oriented. And we only need one accident. That's all we need. It only takes one little small ignition for this to blow. And most people can't escape this. You just can't transport something by train from 200 miles through all these areas where it's heavily populated with people that are poor who can't really move anywhere and not realize all the damage that can be done. It will pass through areas where there's hospitals, where there's universities. In general, there's 200,000 people that live in this area in Philadelphia. Then it will go through the city of Camden, New Jersey, which is one of the poorest cities in all of the United States, and then it will reach Gibbstown.
The terminal's right down the street and next to a daycare, in fact, and their plan is to export liquefied natural gas, or frack gas, and to export it outside of the country, so it will not be for American use.
Kate Delaney was born in southern New Jersey, where she and her family still live. She's now an organizer with Food and Water Watch, monitors goings-on in and around the Gibbstown LNG site, and tries to rally neighbors to realize the potential dangers rolling through their backyards.
This would not be by special rail cars. This would just be existing rail cars, major highways, and through various communities. And the public doesn't even know that this is happening. And it's by schools, it's by nursing homes, it's by, natural areas that we want to protect. It is highly volatile, and if there was an accident somewhere along the route, then they would need to evacuate for a 2-mile radius. And again, people don't even know that this is going to be in their backyard.
Neighbors of the proposed location on the Delaware River across from Philadelphia are used to living near threats. The site previously housed a DuPont plant that manufactured dynamite.
I don't think that they would try and put this in, a more affluent community. They would expect people to ask questions. They would expect people to be maybe paying closer attention to what elected officials are up to. And I think maybe working class people don't have the availability to get to those meetings or don't have maybe the history of engaging in that way. Gloucester County is quickly becoming kind of a dumping site of dangerous projects where we have less money. It's definitely more working class. And I think, it's an economic justice issue.
There is an incredible exploitation that is in this capitalist system that we're living in right now. Black, brown, indigenous, Asian, other communities of color live far more near a fossil fuel plant and are polluted far more disproportionately than white families. The president needs to deal with that.
We have to continue to stand up for the dignity and sovereignty of tribal nations.
I mean, just because the administration hasn't done anything doesn't mean that they can't in the future. The president can stop LNG export terminal permits, fracking and drilling permits, stop investing billions and billions of dollars in fossil fuel infrastructure. There are just so many ways that they can challenge the fossil fuel industry. And what I think it's going to take is continued work by concerned citizens who are going to press President Biden to do what he should do.
And with the power of a pen, he could stop Dakota Access. And with the power of a pen, he could stop Line 3, and stop Line 5, and stop Mountain Valley Pipeline, and stop all this stupid fracking. He promised us as indigenous people that he would listen to us.
On his first day in office, President Biden revoked the permit needed to open the Keystone XL pipeline. A half-built pipeline project already under construction in Virginia. The Mountain Valley Pipeline is years behind schedule, billions of dollars over budget, and deserves the same fate as the XL Keystone project, to be shut down. Former military analyst and co-chair of Protect Our Water Heritage Rights, Russell Chisholm, explains that the MVP project should never have been started in the first place, is being built along the border of a national forest, and is simply unnecessary. Today, even according to its builders, the project is only 55% complete. Yet, citing the impetus created by the war in Ukraine, local politicians, including Senator Joe Manchin, have been pushing for the pipeline to be finished immediately. Lack of permits keep the project stalled, for now.
Folks have come to understand environmental justice issues everywhere in a different way. For example, how treaty rights are often trampled to build some energy project, or in the name of economic development, how Black, brown, and indigenous communities are saddled with all numbers of environmental injustices that disregard that human toll. Everything downstream has to be taken into account too. Our local reservoirs around here are groundwater sources. This is karst terrain. That means caves and caverns that store some of the cleanest water anywhere in the world that people and their livestock rely on for their households, for their families. So it's really hard to put a measure on all of that. And we can report erosion and sediment control violations. We can make sure that the builders are doing everything necessary to protect those sources, but we watch time and time over where that fails. And every decision that Biden makes as an executive, climate should be at the front of the conversation. And if you listen to the scientists, it's not about what we can do in the next 10 years anymore. It's about what we need to be doing right now. And that again comes back to a project like this at 99.999% complete can never be shipping methane downstream. Our communities have been devoted to stopping this over 7+ years. And a small group of people fighting for each other can really change the direction of our energy needs, the conversation around energy, the conversation about worker rights, all of that. It can't just be from us. We don't have the power of somebody like Joe Biden. It starts with him. We've carried the load. And I think we're ready to hand it off to somebody with that level of power and control to join us.
He said that he was going to make climate change one of the big issues of his administration. And instead, we have seen so many things that are the opposite of what he promised. I mean, there's so much that he could do. He could use his bully pulpit to talk about climate change constantly. He could call for a climate emergency. There's no doubt that we need congressional action on fossil fuels. But even without congressional action, the president can use his executive authority, the courts, his agencies, to do so much to move us off of fossil fuels and to really make climate change the priority of his administration. It is the existential threat. He was right. He needs to act like it.
We push solutions off to the future and assume that if we have economic growth, we're going to invent some more technology that will get us out of whatever problem this technology created. And those politicians who think that we can push this off to the future have not lived through the tornado that tore off their roof. They have not lived through the last flood that have destroyed their town. We can't do that. And I assert that there is a different theory of government that we must adopt.
Perhaps the most insidious of the energy plans promoted by the Biden administration, in particular by Secretary of Energy Jennifer Granholm, is a new technology known as carbon capture.
By capturing and storing carbon dioxide from polluting sources, we can make real progress in tackling the climate crisis and in moving toward a clean energy future.
It's a positive-sounding solution, heavily promoted by the fossil fuel industry, akin to natural gas or fracking, which on the surface can be made to sound appealing. But carbon capture is just another way for the fossil fuel industry to profit by producing more carbon emissions and cleaning up nothing.
So what carbon capture and storage is a complex set of machines that is attached to a smokestack where carbon dioxide is being emitted, and it captures that CO2.
We've got to decrease carbon emissions across our economy and remove CO2 from the air at the same time.
And typically what runs carbon capture and storage machinery are gas-fired turbines. So you're fracking more gas out of the ground to run the turbines to capture the CO2, but the accounting doesn't count for the methane, which is even a more powerful greenhouse gas than the carbon dioxide. That just gets a pass. In order to take that carbon somewhere and sequester it, you have to put it in a pipeline. So more energy is now going to be used to turn the gaseous CO2 into a liquid.
Then we take that carbon and we reliably store it in deep underground geological formations.
And so if it should find naturally occurring fractures and fissures, which we know from fracking are down there, right? And enters our groundwater aquifers, which lie above, again, CO2 is going to turn into carbonic acid and acidify people's drinking water supply. The same phenomenon happens in those pipelines. If there's any water at all, it turns into acid and can eat the pipeline away. You can have a rupture of a pipeline, and we've seen it happen in a place called Satartia, Mississippi. It's colorless, it's odorless, it's CO2. People started having seizures, they were falling down. All the ambulances, they sputtered to a stop because combustion engines also need oxygen to run, not just people, right? And then here's like the thing that adds insult to injury. 80% of the carbon that's captured isn't actually stored in a vault somewhere. It's used to get more oil out of the ground.
Carbon capture and storage is an important tool we need to decrease our carbon emissions and to reach our net zero carbon emissions goal by 2050.
Carbon capture and storage is always a net positive for carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere, not even counting the methane. So none of the accounting works, none of the math works. The public health risks are terrifying. And then in the end, we're just using it to get more oil out of the ground. It is an idea that was invented by the fossil fuel industry for the purpose of getting more oil out of the ground. It's not a solution. It shouldn't be accepted as a solution. Why is our White House listening to the fossil fuel industry's proposals for how to solve stuff instead of the scientists who say, hey, wait a minute, not so fast, this doesn't even work?
Currently, there are a trio of pipelines, ranging from 350 to 2,000 miles long, proposed to carry carbon across Iowa, a state where otherwise there are some good energy stories, like the fact that it gets more than 57% of its electricity from wind. While the three pipeline builders battle for public opinion and simultaneously try to buy politicians to sign on, there is a growing movement of Iowans against these projects. Not every Iowan is convinced, especially those who risk losing their land to eminent domain, a constant threat.
So we were told, oh, this is good for Iowa, that we're on your side, we're an agriculture company. And what we have seen is they're only in it for their private property. And the landowners know that this is a terrible idea. And we know that from experience here in Iowa. So we had the Dakota Access Pipeline come through, and the land was destroyed, and the land has not recovered. And what's so fascinating to me about this particular proposal is that it has brought together the really unusual bedfellows in the Midwest who have made common cause with these landowners and with indigenous people. We don't all see eye to eye on much of anything, but here's where we do see eye to eye. We believe in fairness, because it's not good for Iowa. It's not good for landowners and farmers. It's not good for the environment.
We're all of one mind, and the mind is that we love our land.
Jessica Wiskus, a classically trained musician and academic researcher, lives with her husband and 9-year-old daughter, a farm field away from where one of the pipelines would be buried.
When these land agents come in from the pipeline companies, they're offering us some payments for the land that they see on a property deed. But they disregard the gift of the land. They disregard what the land truly means to us. Those easements will have the pipe in the ground forever. There is no plan ever to, take them out again. So it would be in there for my generation and my daughter's generation, my grandchildren's generation. And so these projects to us, they touch the very core of who we are, and it has united us as a community. This fight isn't really just about me as an individual. It's not about my neighbor as an individual. It's about how we belong to the land. And our voices don't often get heard on a national level. We've gone to the public meetings. My neighbors and I have showed up. We've talked to our local representatives, our representatives, our senators. We've gone to the Board of Supervisors. Our government has failed to hear what we truly care about and has failed to respect who we truly are and what motivates us, that we have been disregarded, and what we truly love, what we truly care for, has simply been written off.
Dear President Biden.
Dear President Biden.
Dear President Biden.
Dear President Biden.
Earth breakdown is the single biggest threat facing humanity and our entire planet right now.
We have to change the direction we're going. We cannot afford to ignore the scientists.
Anything fossil fuels can do, renewable energy can do better. Please redirect our nation toward a renewable future.
We need one world leader to step up to the plate right now and turn this whole thing around.
I'm asking you to be a thinker. I'm asking you to be a progressive. I'm asking you to move away from what's destroying the earth.
Need a fossil fuel-free future. Please take action.
We need you to lead on climate, live up to your climate promises.
You have the power to do it.
You can block any future funding for carbon capture and storage and fund real climate solutions.
Not for my sake, but for the next generation and the generation after that.
Please look into your soul. Listen to the scientists for real. You have so much power and you could make such a huge difference.
You said it was an existential threat. Start acting like it. Take action now.
Be the climate president you said you were going to be. Do the right thing. Make the call, Joe.
Dear President Biden, declare a climate emergency now and use all of your executive powers to stop the fossil fuel era and rebuild with a regenerative, just, and renewable future that we need.
I have seen that movie several times, and every time it is amazing without fail. We are going to hop into our panel discussion now. So I'm going to go ahead and spotlight our panelists again. Okay, awesome. Hopefully everyone can see Diane Wilson and John Beard. We have a series of questions for you today about organizing in your communities specifically. So I will ask one or two questions, allow you each to answer in about a minute or so. Yeah, and then we'll just go through the questions and allow you both to answer each of them. So first, Diane and John, can you highlight the current status of the frontline fight in your community? Who are you fighting against, and what progress/wins have you made? Specifically, like for John, I guess since this documentary has come out as well, like what's changed? Yeah, I guess we could start with Diane.
Oh, okay. I guess the probably the most prominent one is the fight against Formosa Plastics. You know, there was the $9 billion plastic facility Formosa was trying to get in Louisiana. Well, they already have a $7 billion plastic industry in my county on Lavaca Bay, and we are commercial fishermen, and the bay has always been predominantly something that I really cared about. And Formosa makes plastic. They make PVC plastic powder, polypropylene, polyethylene. They make pellets also. And for years, pretty much 27 years, they have been discharging plastic into the bay, and they have not been reporting it. The state hasn't went after them. So after repeated questions to the state, to the EPA, to Formosa, to anyone that would listen, on my own, I started just walking out to the bay and started picking up powder and plastic. And, you know, you often talk about who are your people you work with. Well, what's interesting, I guess, for me is that I'm a commercial fisherwoman, 4th generation. That's basically all I knew. And my sources became the workers inside the plant. They were either whistleblowers, they were injured workers, or they were so fed up with what Formosa was doing that they would reach out to me. And that happens when you're in a place where you can't go to the company because they'll fire you. You can't go to the state environmental agency because they're in the pocket of industry in the state of Texas. You can't go to your elected officials because the elected officials in my county are working for the company. They've got contracts with them. So you basically, there is no one you can go to for help. So eventually, I stayed at it so long, they eventually had to start coming to me with information. So I found out information about Formosa Plastics that even the supervisors sometimes did not know what was going on. And so I had a couple of workers from the plant and myself, and we spent 2.5 years almost daily walking pretty much 20 square miles of water. And eventually we found all the stormwater outfalls, and I started taking a kayak up to the stormwater outfalls, and we collected over 2,000 samples. I took 8,000 videos and photographs, and we didn't have a red cent in my little environmental group. So we got the Texas Rio Grande legal aid. It was a legal aid that would do environmental work. And we sued Formosa on a citizen suit, and we won $50 million. And we basically got them to zero discharge of plastic. We got enforcement. We are doing the enforcement. And at this point, Formosa has had to pay over $7.4 million in penalties for violations within the last year. And right now we're into cleanup of the plastics just in the creek. And we're not even talking about the bay right now. In the creek, it's going to be a $30 million cleanup that's going to take 2 years of all of the plastic it's all over the bay. It's got mercury on it. We got a mercury super fund, so it's picked up the mercury. So that is what I've been working for probably the last 5 years. And right on top of it, there's a max midstream oil export coming in right on top of the plastic and the mercury, and they want to dig a channel and bring in all of these huge ships. And this crazy thing, this is the area where the shrimpers shrimp. And so this dredging of the mercury and of the pellets to get these ships in, it's going to bury 800 acres of commercial oyster reefs and 1,000 acres of seagrasses. So it's a mess. So basically, and I got to say, I'm from a very small community. Calhoun County is probably maybe 8,000 people. You know, it's tiny. It's a little bit bigger now, but it's very small. It's very rural, and there was no environmental groups. Nobody would want to go up against industry. Formosa, like 2,500 acres, 3,000 workers. They, you know, and your mayors got contracts with them. So I basically have did civil obedience. That is what I did, because it really, it just takes your passion and your commitment for what you believe in. And you know, and it's only recently that the lawsuits, which blew my mind, you know. I've normally been doing civil disobedience, but anyway, so I am working on the plastics with Formosa Plastics. Nobody wants that company anywhere near them. And I'm working to stop a oil export in Matagorda Bay, and did a hunger strike. I've did quite a few hunger strikes. I think I've did 13 of them. So anybody wants to know about hunger strikes, I can tell you a thing or two about it. And so that's what we're trying to do down there.
Thank you so much, Diane, for that very passionate answer. I see there's a lot of love for you in the chat right now. And I also want to recognize that I see that folks have a few specific questions. So we're going to hear from John, and then we'll get into the Q&A where you can ask questions directly to the speakers. But as far as direct actions that we can all take, that is what we're going to spend the last 5 to 10 minutes wrapping up on. We'll send some like petitions, some phone numbers to call. The action items will just be at the end, and also in a follow-up email. So I see your comments and concerns. We are not ignoring you. And now, John, I'll repeat the question. Can you highlight the current status of your frontline fight in your community? Who are you fighting against? What progress or wins have you made? And I think Diane touched on this part a little bit. Can you share a few challenges of organizing in your frontline community? I'll also put that in the chat. It was a lot.
Okay, well, let me start with the challenges in a community such as mine. It's a community that's in the heart of petrochem country. Matter of fact, it started just 15 miles up the road from me here in Beaumont with the advent of Spindletop in 1901. And by 1903, the first refineries were built here, Gulf Oil and the Texas Company, better known as Texaco. And this area has been very supportive of the petrochemical industry because of the jobs it created and the opportunities it created. That's what brought my dad from the farms of East Texas and my mother from the farms of Southwest Louisiana to Port Arthur. And the rest was history, or me. But that's what brought them here, to get that fame, and not fame and fortune, but to build a life, to have better income, to do things that their parents weren't able to do, being sharecroppers and farmers and all like that. But then things changed and shifted. Where I was growing up, kids' parents either worked at the plant, one of the 2 or 3 plants, or they did business with a company that worked in the plant or otherwise. But now they're not hiring people of color in my city. That is almost 80% people of color. And the opportunities aren't there for young people because most of their hiring now is for people outside of the city. So it's basically starving the city off by its economic means and not extending that opportunity to others, while at the same time poisoning the very air that they breathe, so that every breath they take is laced with toxins and poisons. So here's where our fights come in. The most recent of which is SEMPA, or Port Arthur LNG facility. That would be the 3rd LNG in the immediate Port Arthur environment. 2 of them are in Port Arthur proper, which is Golden Pass currently. SEMPA would make the 2nd, but also across the river, I guess you could say, from Port Arthur, or across Lake Sabine, is the Cheniere LNG Sabine Pass. So we would have 3 LNGs just downwind from our city. So any pollution or anything that came off from them would be carried into the city. And then and we've been fighting their air quality permits. Texas, as Diane said earlier, never met a permit it didn't like. So you're gonna have to fight them every step of the way. So the first thing we're trying to do is attack their air quality permits. First stage was to get me to pass forth a contested case, and we won that. And in the contested case, I became the affected party because I do have some health issues that would be affected by more adverse pollution, and that I also recreate in the area immediately adjacent to where they're planning to build this thing. So it would affect the recreation of not only me, but others. And then you also have the issue with what they're going to do to the air quality. My organization was able to secure funding to get an air quality study and analysis done, which showed that they would significantly contribute to it. So our next move was to come up with how can they combat that? What is the best available control technology they can use? By the way, the other court case as a affected party, we won that too. Matter of fact, we won 3 of those cases before the administrative law judge. But just most recently, we lost the case will be 3 weeks ago, Wednesday, yesterday, where the TCEQ completely went against the administrative law judge's ruling that they put in the best available technology. They also went against the EPA's guidance, which we wanted to mention to our lawyers in the letter they sent, and they ruled that we could not even admit it, we couldn't even talk about it. So we didn't have a chance to defend what was given to us, what was there that would get them to clean up the air quality, which would remove 30 to 40% of the toxins in the air they would emit. And it was on the flimsiest of grounds, stating that because these companies, which are using best available technologies, had not yet dug or broke ground and built these things, we had no way to really verify it. But they said, but what we're doing, oh yes, it will do that. It's already verified and it's there. But they haven't turned a spade of dirt at their site yet. So how do you make that conclusion and that jump? But anyway, we're still thinking of ways that we're going to address that. And we have some at our disposal, and we're going to put them into action. We just haven't sat and talked and really looked at everything. But that's one fight, the most recent. But then we've also got our fight against Oxbow Calcinining, which is a Koch brothers company that basically takes petroleum coke from these refineries and runs it through furnaces and burns off the contaminants that's in the coke. But those contaminants are released into the air. If you go on our Facebook page or my Facebook page, Pecan's Facebook page and websites, you'll see pictures of this. And you'll see the plumes that can be seen visible from any part of Southeast Texas at night and during the day. And they are the worst serial polluters, I call them, in Texas, because they emit over 11,000 tons of sulfur compounds and particulate matter into the air a year. So can you imagine what that would look like? I mean, this stuff is so fine in the 2.5 micron range that if you happen to breathe it in, it goes directly into your bloodstream. Your nose can't filter it, mask can't really filter it out. And so we're breathing this stuff every day. Then you also have Valero, which had over a 5-year period, over 600 air quality violations. We filed against them, and 2 days before we were supposed to go to court, they filed with the Attorney General, or the Attorney General of the state of Texas intervened in the case, took it over, and he has yet to do anything. He's sitting on it for the last 3 years. But we, about a month and a half ago, served notice to them. I went to Austin with several other groups, and we served notice to them. And the notice I served to Ken Paxton, the Attorney General, was, Ken, you're on the clock. And we're not going to wait another 3 years to get you off of those papers and get you off of this case. You're going to do it, or else you're on the clock. And we're going to do something about it. So that's just two of the fights. We recently won one against Motiva for dumping flood water or water that was inside their plant into the city's storm drain system. That storm drain system goes to the Foley Avenue pump station. Foley Avenue pump station has a discharge canal that goes into the Sabine Neches waterway, which goes into the Gulf of Mexico, where we like to fish, eat, and recreate. And some of this plant water, in case you've never worked at a plant, has herbicides, pesticides in it, and also oil that has leaked or leached into the ground from the tanks or from valves that have leaked or flanges or whatever, or something that happened to be released. But whatever could be in there is in there. When the water gets in it, it comes up out of the water. And they want to say they didn't release any oil in the water, but then we found pictures, I had pictures I had taken of booms or socks, oil retardant socks or that absorb the oil that were in the ditch. And then we came by on another occasion, so they were trying to clean out the ditch with a front end loader and piling the dirt, not in a roll-off box or not on some plastic or something non-permeable so they wouldn't leach back into the soil. They piled it on the ground. So those kinds of things, we get information from our citizens and talk to them and others. But as I said earlier, it's an area that's so highly invested in petrochemicals that most people don't want to say anything because they have relatives or friends or people they know of, or even the public in general. If you're on a blog or something, or even a newspaper thing, or say something about the petrochemicals, it brings down a lot of heat. So you have to be willing to take those stands and stand up to do it. The companies are not remiss when we call for a review of their permits with TCEQ, to open this up to the public and have a public hearing. They're not adverse to letting their employees off early and filling the whole place up with people who don't live in Port Arthur and don't have to smell it and put up with the pollution, or the flares, or the fires, or any of that stuff. So that's just some of what we're fighting on that front. Then we're also fighting the Blue Marlin pipeline that's trying to come through here. That's going to cut through Bessie Heights Marsh, which is a prime estuary for young fish and crab and shrimp, and then cut from there back through Lake Sabine, through 12 of its 19-mile length, disturbing oyster beds and fishing and recreation, then going into Louisiana, tying into another line that's going to go another 100 miles offshore for the exportation of crude oil from America. And I've got something to say about that, but I won't say it right now just to finish this up. But we've got that, fighting the LNG, Central Blue Marlin, but also fighting the flooding that has happened. Because a lot of the flood waters in some of the most critically impacted areas of the community were in the Black community. And the water was so high that I have a friend of mine took a picture. And when he left to go to work that evening, the water was about curb high. So he was able to get out in his truck. But 12 hours later, his wife sent him a picture, and looking from their second floor window of their home across at the neighbor's house. And the best way I can describe it to you is the water was so high that when boats came down that morning, the guys stepped off the boat onto the rooftops of homes. And they would use a hammer or an axe to chop a hole if they heard somebody so they could let people get out to rescue. That's just how bad it was. But yet there's nothing in that flood plan, as I listened to them discuss it yesterday, that even addresses that problem. So that's something else we have to work on. So we're a community development, but also environmental organization. And we try to address and attack those things. With my former company used to say, we take on the world's toughest energy problems. Well, we take on some of the world's toughest energy polluters, the ones that are doing the damage to our homes and lives and our futures. And that's just some of what we do.
Thank you so much for sharing your work, John. I hope everyone was following. I know you both are involved with so many different fights within your community. I see there's a question. Could you both just drop the cities that you're advocating for in the chat? I know, John, you're in Port Arthur. Diane, I had you listed as like the Gulf Coast. I don't know if that means moving around a lot, but just in the chat for folks. And then could you each spend just like a minute answering, can you please reiterate the need for executive action and your demands for President Biden, like what power he has to bring change to your specific situation? And then at about 7:15, hopefully we can open up a Q&A discussion for some of our folks here. So yeah, Diane, did you want to start us off with?
I actually think, matter of fact, I was supposed to have been in Austin. I think today they were having the same thing y'all were having, except they were having it in Austin. And the Secretary of Transportation, Mr. Pete was going to be there. And actually, he's got authority to stop these permitting of the oil exports. And, you know, I truly believe that they have it where, you know, I think you showed it on your video, that young woman that was up there, and with a pen, they can write it off, and they can. But the thing of it is, and, you know, and I hate to put in a little dark thing, is like, this is what I think there is a problem. Like, you know, Biden's good and it's so much better than it was, but it's like in my county, the Democratic Party would not even let me talk about the environment because it was too controversial. So it's like the Democrats can be good, but it's like, you know, they're real leery of compromise. And so I really do believe is like, I mean, people got to be there. They got to be there to push them to do the right thing. So go for Biden, but don't walk away from it. Don't walk away, folks.
Keep the pressure on. We got to hold.
Yes.
Accountable. Yes.
Be the little shadow for him. Yeah, we do.
We know about that a little too well in San Diego. Yeah, John, could you please reiterate the need for executive action and your demands for President Biden?
Well, yes, basically it comes down to just what Diane said. But what we've got to think about, as I've talked to many people, is about escalating pressure. We can't be laid back, sit back and be content. We have to keep turning up the heat, turning it up a notch, contacting our representatives, talking to them, telling them, contacting the party. We've got to, my background and everything tells me this, if we're going to get this done. At some point, we've got to take the fight here, right here. You ever notice when kids fight or people fight and they brace up to each other and get almost nose to nose, or when boxers do that? You got to take the fight to the chest. You got to make that fight and your desire to have a better world and to change this so real that they can't avoid it. So as I said earlier, like Diane's done and others, we talk about this, but we want you to come here and see it. And we're going to be having some special guests come here in the near future, and have been talking to others, and hopefully you guys get to keep up with it, hear about this and all. And that's the thing, but we need him to declare a climate emergency, because with the stroke of his pen, he can do what Pete Buttigieg, and we've talked to Pete at COP and since then about this. He doesn't have to worry about whether Pete approves them doing it, Department of Transportation does it, or MIRAD about the offshore facilities and LNG. He can just eliminate that with the stroke of his pen and then turn right around and fix things where we can be on a different course. But they're too afraid of the big money of big oil and those lobbyists that are in DC. And we have to amplify our voices, because they've got billions of dollars, but ladies and gentlemen, there are billions of us. So we're not fighting this alone. We have allies we built across lines. So we've got to get him to do this. You have to encourage your representatives that this is what we want. If we need you to tell him this is what we want, because I'm gonna tell you, he thinks that the IRA is the solution. So once they passed that, they felt that, hey, they crossed a major hurdle, but they haven't. And we need to remind them of it and hold their feet to the fire, keep escalating the pressure to get that action done. But the first step in doing that is we got to stop the Manchin dirty deal that they're trying to pull, because that is a death knell for all of our coastal communities. How are you going to stop? You know, they talked about the 2 degrees Celsius. Really, y'all, is 1.5 degrees Celsius. And right now we're at either 1.2 or 1.3. At 1.5, we'll be a climate catastrophe. But I went to a meeting earlier this year of the whole industry worldwide, CERAWeek conference, right there in Houston. And at CERAWeek, John Kerry, the U.S. envoy to the president, White House for climate change, said this, that we cannot reduce our carbon footprint by 40% by 2030. That would crash the industry, crash the economy. But we can do it by 2050, but here's the problem. By 2050, we will exceed the 1.5 to as much as 2.7 to 2.8 degrees Celsius. Well, that is truly climate catastrophe, because there will be no more polar caps, there will be no more icebergs, there will be no more snow-capped mountains or peaks. And we think it's been a hot summer, and with the fires out west that you all have had, we think it's bad with the storms in the Gulf, and there's one in the Caribbean now, and I'm keeping my eye on it, that you ain't seen bad yet if it gets to that point. And we're already ahead of the curve, the scientists are telling us. So we've got to do something and do it now. You can't keep doing the same thing that's causing the problem and say you're addressing it. If you're going to give relief to coastal communities in Texas, then you've got to stop what you're doing and go back the other way. You can't continue to go forward. So we've got to get that from him. We've got to stop the Manchin dirty deal, because it would mute and silence all our voices. Just like Diane said, the Democrats did, Republicans are trying to do it. But if he puts this bill in place and call it this act that's going to make everything freer and better for, energy independence and all of that, that is as big a joke and a ruse as you could ever hear. Because energy independence doesn't happen when you sell all the oil you pull out of the ground to other countries. You keep more of your oil, as they told us they would, so we could be stronger. We wouldn't have to be depending on foreign countries. But we're selling it to them, and some of them aren't our friends exactly. So we've got to get a lot smarter. We've got to take the lead and the narrative and talk about this issue and bring it to people and keep ratcheting up the pressure on our local officials, whether it's state, county, city, and even the federals. And we got to get Biden to do this. And we got to keep hammering away at him. Don't get tired. If you get tired, take a little break, but take a deep breath and go back to work and just keep hitting him again. It's just like in the boxing game. We're gonna keep hitting him till we soften him up and until he either throws in the towel or he tap out. But we're gonna win this. And we're gonna have to keep unrelenting, unremitting pressure because the people can win. It's been proven throughout history. They may have billions of dollars, but there are millions and billions of us. We're gonna win this fight, I assure you. May not win all the little battles, but we will win the war. So, hey, we got to keep doing the work. So get in touch with your representatives and encourage them. Write the White House, call the White House. Don't let up. Keep fighting.
Yes. Thank you so much for those words of encouragement. I hope you lit a fire under all of us, I'm sure. Now we'll open it up to like 1 or 2 questions from the audience. And then as many of you have asked, we'll get into those like direct actions, how you can get involved with fighting Manchin's dirty deal. So yeah, if you would like to ask Diane or John a question, please raise your hand and we can unmute you. And yes, thank you, Eloise. She just put there's a survey in the chat. If y'all could fill that out while we hear some question and answers. It is just about how this event went and how we can follow up with you and engage you in this fight against fossil fuels. Glenda, yes.
Is President Biden going to actually receive and view this film?
I'm not sure, honestly. Does anyone have a better answer than me? I know, John, you were a part of like the filmmaking process. I don't know if it's, yeah.
It's kind of like an open letter to him, but we're going to try to find ways to get it to him. I mean, like I said, we'll be visiting with some of the FERC people. Oops, I didn't mean to say that, but we will be. But anytime, you know, we when we have these contacts, we just don't contact them with our list of complaints or whatever, but we give them something to take with them. Then we can do that. We can give them the link to this film because it is on YouTube and they can see it. And we've seen that there have been some success in the past with that. Even if you give it to some of the other senators and congressmen and their people, their policy people look at it. Find ways to get in. You know, there's that old saying, Glenda, if you can't get in through a door, if they lock the door, find a window. If you can't get in the window, do like Bump Phillips said for the Houston Oilers, kick the son of a bitch in. Excuse my expression, but find a way to get in, find a way to do it and keep doing it and keeping up that pressure. But we're going to find a way to get it to him, but we think he's going to see it. That's why the more people see this, the more it's talked about and shared, more likely is he's going to see it, but we're also going to take some direct action too.
Yes, and I think the film also mobilizes folks to do those declare a climate emergency type rallies that we've seen across the country. And we know Biden's definitely seeing that when we have a day of action and it's happening in dozens of states and dozens of cities across the country. Does one more person want to ask a question before we get into our closing asks and calls to action? If you raise your hand, I can unmute you. Yes. Masada.
Hi, just really want to thank Diane and John for being here tonight. Your fights are so inspiring. John, I just wanted to ask, we have been doing some fighting with SEMPRA here, which is based here in San Diego, and just if there's anything that you feel would be especially helpful in your fight, because you're really on the front lines. I mean, we have their giant office building here, which we frequent, but yeah, if there's anything that we can do that would be helpful from California.
Well, I'll share my email and number with you because I have been talking to some of our people, and that's maybe what we need to do next is take that fight, like I said, to their front door. We did that with what's that company? Enterprise Pipelines or Energy Transfer Partners, who is building the Blue Marlin pipeline. And we, Energy Transfer was also the same company that, while Texas was freezing its ass off last year with Winter Storm Uri, they were the ones looking at trying to increase the cost of natural gas in Texas. Matter of fact, they made $2.4 billion, while over 250 Texans, we estimate, died from this. I mean, they made money. And the first act of business after he made all this nice money was to give a $1 million donation to the campaign, re-election campaign of Governor Greg Do Nothing Abbott. Meanwhile, while Americans, Texans were freezing, Abbott was, holding press conferences and doing other things. He wasn't fighting the real problem, and the problem still hasn't been addressed. But yeah, I would like to go and visit their headquarters and join with you guys. We could plan a dual action and come over there and give them a piece of my mind and let them know. Matter of fact, what we did for Energy Transfer for that 1-year anniversary of Winter Storm Uri, we made a human-sized postcard thanking them with a poem that one of our people made and telling them how we really felt. And we also had a nice sheet cake made. They didn't accept the sheet cake, so we had to find somebody else. But this time, maybe what we'll do is be a little sneaky. Maybe if there's someone inside that we know of, we can say, hey, look, let's deliver this to them. Here's a special delivery, send a guy to Uber people or whatever and say, hey, I got something for so-and-so and so. Go in there and give it to them and bring the card and then have the demonstration outside. Because before, when I went in, they were very nice and courteous. But after that, you're no longer wanted on the premises. Matter of fact, we couldn't even assemble on the sidewalk. They called the police. Police didn't do anything. They just talked to us and all and said, wait, next time, let us know you're going to be here or whatever. But, if you can, hurry up and do that and move along. Say, hey, we're almost through, guys. We appreciate it, officer. But yeah, we need to do an action there because they're really lousy. I'm telling you, they really, I even think because, that facility is located right across the water from Pleasure Island. And I was on the Pleasure Island Commission. I was, matter of fact, our president of the board. And I just been reappointed again for another term, but the new councilman that came on about 2 months after that, because they shifted the election, don't ask me why, he decided that he wanted to put someone else there. So he had me removed to put someone else there. And when we were at this hearing about it, they went so far as to produce the document that showed that, well, he's no longer, he doesn't have anything to do with Pleasure Island because he's no longer on the board. But I go out there to watch the birds, to watch the ships, and to just generally relax, and the fish. So what are you trying to do? Say that I have no tie to it at all, yet I live within the 4 to 5 miles you say makes you affected? Even by your own admission, you said that. So they're kind of lousy. There's much more I could tell you. We'll have to talk privately, but I'll share my information with you. And let's see if we can put something together. I've been thinking about that.
Yeah, Masada is actually our executive director of San Diego 350. And she just dropped a few links in the chat from our last action at Sempra. We've been there at their headquarters downtown San Diego twice this year. The last time, as you said, bring the fight to their front door. We literally brought it to their very front door with banners and whatnot. Yeah, so if you want to check that out, she also put her contact information.
I just pulled it up, saw the pictures. Y'all let me know the next time you got one planned. I'll be there. I'll be there with bells on. I definitely like to twist that. Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you both so much for joining us. I don't know if you have any emails or websites or anything that you want to share with people, but please feel free to put that in the chat so that people, if you have a website with action items, if you have a website with action items for folks to get involved with your frontline fights, petitions to sign, all of that, please put it in the chat. I will remove the spotlight now. But yeah, we're gonna spend about 5 minutes, for those of you that hung on for the call, we'll spend about 5 minutes talking about who to call next, what our next steps are, and how you can get involved locally with San Diego 350, with any of the other organizations that are hosting this event. So thank you again, Diane Wilson and John Beard. It was such a pleasure to have you both.
Okay, you got some more information right there.
Mm-hmm.
Look forward to hearing from you. And thank you all for viewing the film. Keep up your good work. Don't lose faith. Stay encouraged. Encourage each other. Take care of your health. You don't be coughing and hacking like I was. But it's getting better. I'm just glad to be able to be here and share with you guys, because we all need each other. It's going to take all hands on deck and everybody pulling together and working together. We all got our fights, and all those fights are interconnected. because we only have one place we can call home, and that's this planet Earth. And all we've got is each other here.
Yeah, and I just want to say I appreciate the opportunity to talk to people all the way in California who've got the very similar fights that we have down here. It's all a fight. And all I want to do is, the only thing I tell people is raise hell, and we're too well behaved. We have to make good mischief. Anyway, so that's my, I guess that's always my bottom line. That's always where I come from, is like, when you, I think we got to realize that it's not just the politicians or the agencies or the president or the representatives. It is us. I really believe. I've been 33 years in a very rural, hidden place, and it's the people that will make the difference. That's where my faith is. And if we can, you know, and I, you know, I don't know whether it's my just feelings about politicians, but I really believe that when the people make a difference and they start creating their own wind out there, that's when the politicians come along. We are the vision makers. And so it's going to come from us, you know, it's going to come from us. And thank you for inviting me. And don't give up and raise hell.
Thank you both so much for joining us today. I see there's a lot of love for y'all in the chat and a lot of appreciation for your years of dedication and for taking time out of your busy freaking schedules to come inspire all of us to take action and to be just as fierce. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We just wanted to wrap up with a few action items. Again, I just put the survey in the chat. Super important because A, we want your feedback, but we also want to be able to connect you with your local organization so that we can organize people power and create these large actions at these executives' front doors and really shake things up. So people power is key, and we would really love to get in contact with you. Additionally, in the film, there was talk about Mountain Valley Pipeline. That was just one of many frontline fights that was emphasized, but it is truly a current event. It is happening right now. We are in the heat of that fight, I would say. For those of you that aren't familiar, we'll be dropping a toolkit in the chat about Manchin's dirty deal. But basically, in order to pass the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, Democratic leadership agreed to also pass Manchin's permitting reform bill, which was literally written by and for the fossil fuel industry. It has a lot of handouts. It has a lot of it. As John was saying, it really would make frontline fights more difficult because it just steamrolls the process. It takes out a lot of community input. It takes out a lot of judicial review. And it also specifically expedites the Mountain Valley Pipeline that we heard about in the documentary. It says, we are going to get this done regardless of the cost, regardless of the harm to communities. And we're not going to hear any input about it. So that we are in the last week of fighting that and really having a chance to use our people power and mass organization to kill this bill before it becomes law. So the toolkit gives you all sorts of details about calling your local representatives next week. Right now, we are putting pressure on the Senate. So wherever you are, you can call your local senator. If you're in California, if you're in San Diego, we're putting a lot of pressure on Senator Padilla. I know a few folks on this call, shout out Rita and Scott, and a few others have made calls to Senator Padilla's office, and he's been getting flooded with calls. He's been getting blown up, and they are feeling the heat. So that is amazing. That we can see it happening, we can see it working actively, and we are not going to let up. As they said, we are going to raise hell. We are going to fill up their voicemail, bust their phone lines, whatever it takes for them to hear that their constituents do not want them to sign on to this deal. We do not support this. We will not support them if they support this. So that toolkit tells you all the background about this dirty deal, the harm it causes, some talking points for when you make those calls. Unfortunately, I don't have a list of all of your local senators, but it is very easy to look up their Washington, D.C. office since they are in session right now. Just look up both of your senators for your state, give them a call, let them know that you oppose attaching Manchin's dirty deal to the Continuing Resolution Act. That was the part I left out, sorry. That they are trying to attach this permitting, quote unquote, permitting reform bill that expedites fossil fuel projects. They are trying to attach that piece of legislation to the Continuing Resolution, which is a must have spending package in order to avoid a government shutdown. So they are trying to force senators and House representatives to either vote for this dirty deal that is going to potentially, I'll say potentially, cancel out the benefits of the IRA or shut down the government. So Manchin and Schumer are really trying to put Democrats in a very difficult position, but we want them to know we do not support this bill. We do not want it attached to the Continuing Resolution spending. Yeah, so that is all about Manchin's dirty deal. The toolkit will tell you more about that. And other than that, ways to get involved. I emphasize that so strongly because it is happening now. They have a week to pass this. They have until the 30th that they need to pass the Continuing Resolution. So we have a definitive timeline for that. This week we're focusing on the Senate. Next week we are focusing on the House of Representatives. Other than stopping Manchin's dirty deal, we will be planning a coordinated day of action across the country. You can help us by attending meetings in your region, helping with promotion, and showing up on the day of. We'll be announcing the date of that in the near future. We're still in the very early planning stages, but it is going to be a coordinated day of action where we're calling on President Biden to declare a climate emergency. Fighting this dirty deal is like defense. They threw us a curveball. They're trying to do something shady, so we're fighting that. But we also want to have offensive tactics where we're actively pressuring him to do what we want, right? So that is what the coordinated day of action will be all about. And again, on this call, we have 350 groups from all over the country. We have Bay Area, San Diego, Seattle, Portland, Wisconsin, so many, and then so many other folks supporting it as well. Also, put it in the chat if I left anyone out. But yeah, Colorado, oh my goodness, the first new Zoom we're using. Thank you, Masada, it's late. We have 350 groups all over the country hosting this call who will also be participating in this day of action. So there
Don't forget Greenbelt, Maryland. I'm looking at Lori and Michael.
Yeah, we got Maryland in the house. Who else do we got? Yeah, shout out where you're from in the chat. We have folks all over North Carolina. And we'll be having actions popping up in all of these cities, hopefully, on the same day, saying Biden declared climate emergency now, so they, again, can really feel the heat and know that there are thousands of people across this country that are passionately care about ending fossil fuel extraction and are watching him and holding him accountable for the promises he made when many of us voted back in 2020. Yeah, so if you fill out the survey, we can get in touch with you about how to help plan that coordinated day of action. For folks in San Diego, I'm the People versus Fossil Fuels coordinator in San Diego. Like I coordinate that portion of the campaign. But we meet every other Tuesday at 6 p.m. Our next meeting is this Tuesday coming up, the 27th. So if you're interested in attending, please fill out the survey and we will invite you. And we also have a youth climate strike going on tomorrow at 12 p.m. downtown. We can drop the event page in the chat. But yeah, we'll be reiterating the demands for President Biden along with several other demands that the youth have. And this is another coordinated National Day of Action where high school students will be walking out across the country. Yeah, I'll be hanging on for a few minutes afterward. It seems like the chat is very active right now, so I don't want to cut anyone's thoughts short. But thank you all so much for attending. We'll be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow morning with links to all of the action items from today. Please fill out the survey so we can connect you with a local 350 organization to get involved with the fight against fossil fuels. We need people power to create the change we want to see in the world. So we need all of you actively engaged. Yeah, thank you so much for attending. And I will, yeah, I see the chat's still very active. So we'll address any questions if anyone's still hanging on. But that concludes our evening. And again, big shout out to John Beard and Diane Wilson for taking time out of their crazy schedules to be here today.